The silent arrival. The galactic confluence had never seen anything quite like humanity's entrance into the cosmic community. Most species announced themselves through decades of radio signals, mathematical proofs broadcast into the void, or careful diplomatic overtures. Humans simply appeared one day at the edge of confluence space with a battered colony ship and a hand-painted message on its hull. "We come in peace, sorry for the mess." Commander Cale Thorne stood on the observation deck of the Perseverance, watching the massive crystalline structure of the confluence's primary station grow larger in the viewport. Behind her, the crew buzzed with nervous energy. 300 souls had traveled 42 light-years in cryosleep, betting everything on ancient radio signals that suggested intelligent life beyond Earth. "Commander, we're receiving a transmission," said Lieutenant Marcus Webb, his fingers dancing across the holographic interface. "It's complicated." Cale moved to his station. The message scrolled across the screen in 17 different languages, none of which were human. Then, at the bottom, a crude translation appeared in English: "State your harmonic resonance frequency for docking clearance." Harmonic what? Marcus looked as confused as Cale felt. Before she could respond, the ship's AI, which they'd nicknamed Sage, interjected. "The phrase appears to reference a form of communication based on vibrational patterns rather than linguistic structures. Scanning the station's output frequencies now." The confluence station pulsed with colors that seemed to breathe, each hue shifting in patterns that made Cale's eyes water if she stared too long. She'd led missions through asteroid fields and negotiated treaties with Earth's fractious colony worlds, but nothing had prepared her for this. "Just respond that we're new here and need guidance," Cale ordered. What happened next would become legend among human explorers. The confluence sent an emissary, a creature named Veshnar who resembled a floating collection of bioluminescent tentacles arranged around a central core that might have been a head. Veshnar didn't speak. Instead it hummed. The sound resonated through the Perseverance's hull, a frequency that bypassed Cale's ears entirely and seemed to vibrate directly in her chest cavity. Images flooded her mind. The confluence's history, thousands of species communicating through harmonic resonance, sharing thoughts and feelings through carefully modulated vibrations that transcended the limitations of language. When the connection ended, Cale staggered backward, gripping the console for support. Did everyone else just see that? Yeah. Marcus looked pale. "Commander, they don't use words. None of them. The entire galactic confluence communicates through some kind of empathic frequency transmission." Dr. Amara Singh, the ship's xenobiologist, pushed onto the bridge, her dark eyes wide with excitement. "It's incredible. They're not reading our thoughts. It's more like they're sharing emotional contexts and conceptual frameworks. Language evolved differently here. They never needed words." "Then how are we supposed to communicate?" Cale asked. "Humans talk. We debate, we argue, we tell stories. It's what we do." Sage's synthetic voice cut through the discussion. "Preliminary analysis suggests that humanity may be the only known species in the Confluence database that relies primarily on verbal linguistic communication. All 847 documented species utilize some variant of harmonic resonance." The crew fell silent. The weight of that statement settled over them like a shroud. "So we're deaf and mute by their standards," Marcus said quietly. Veshnar hummed again, and this time Cale understood, not words but meaning. Curiosity. Wonder. And underneath it all, a question: how do you exist without harmony? Over the following weeks, the humans learned the basics. The confluence operated through something they called the symphony, a constant, ever-present network of harmonic communication that connected every member of every species across vast distances. Decisions were made through resonance consensus, where thousands of beings would harmonize their thoughts until a solution emerged that satisfied all participants. Conflicts were resolved through dissonance meditation, where disagreeing parties would modulate their frequencies until they found common ground. It was beautiful. It was efficient. And humans couldn't participate in any of it. Cale attended her first confluence assembly and watched in awe as representatives from dozens of species, crystalline beings that chimed like wind chimes, massive gas creatures that rumbled like thunderstorms, tiny insectoid races that buzzed in perfect unison, all communicating in a symphony of sound and emotion. She and her team sat in their designated space, isolated, able to observe but never truly participate. That night, Cale found Dr. Singh in the lab, surrounded by holographic displays showing frequency analyses and neural scans. "There has to be a way," Amara said without looking up. "We can't be fundamentally incompatible with the entire galaxy." "Maybe we are," Cale replied, surprising herself with the bitterness in her voice. "Maybe we're too primitive. Too limited. No. Amara finally met her eyes. We're just different. And maybe that's not a weakness. The weight of silence. 3 months after first contact, humanity's position in the galactic confluence remained precarious at best. The Perseverance had been granted provisional docking rights, but the crew lived in a strange limbo, welcomed as a curiosity but excluded from the fundamental workings of galactic society. Kale stood before the Confluence Council, a gathering of 50 representatives from the major species. They arranged themselves in a circle within what humans called the resonance chamber, a massive spherical room where the walls themselves seemed to absorb and amplify harmonic frequencies. She'd brought Marcus and Amara with her, along with their newest crew member, Zara Okonkwo, a former hostage negotiator who'd been in cryosleep like the rest but had emerged with an unexpected talent. Zara could almost hear the symphony. It's not that I understand them, she'd explained during their strategy session. It's more like, you know when you can feel the mood of a room even though nobody said anything? It's like that but amplified 1,000 times. Now, as the council began their session, Kale watched Zara's face contort with concentration. The chamber filled with harmonics, deep bass notes from the Thrumkale, crystalline chimes from the Shard Collective, whistling frequencies from the Windborn. Each species added their voice to the symphony, building a complex tapestry of sound that made Kale's teeth ache. Through their translator implants, crude devices that converted harmonic resonance into approximate human concepts, Kale understood they were discussing trade routes through the Andromeda Corridor. But the richness of the actual conversation was lost to her. She caught fragments, concerns about resource allocation, memories of past disputes, emotional undertones of trust and suspicion. They're arguing about us, Zara whispered, her hands pressed against her temples. Not directly, but some of them are worried. They think our presence disrupts the symphony. Kale's jaw tightened. How? We're like gaps. Holes in their network. When they try to include us in the resonance, we create dead zones. It frustrates them. A being named Toralax, representative of the Thrumkale, a species of massive rock-like creatures who communicated through seismic vibrations, directed attention toward the humans. The translation came through harsh and uncomfortable. The voiceless ones request trade agreements. How can we trust those we cannot harmonize with? How can we know their intentions when they hide behind verbal deceptions? Deceptions? Kale stepped forward. We've been nothing but honest. Words can lie, came the response, though Kale couldn't identify which council member had sent it. The symphony cannot. You speak with sounds that carry no emotional resonance. You could promise peace while planning war and we would never know. Amara touched Kale's arm, a warning to keep calm. But Kale felt heat rising in her chest. They'd traveled 42 light years, left everything behind, hoping to join a community of intelligent species. Instead they were being called liars. If I may, Amara stepped forward, her voice steady. You're right that we communicate differently. But that doesn't make us dishonest. It makes us complementary. Has the Confluence ever considered that there might be value in our perspective? The symphony swelled with confusion, curiosity, and something that felt like condescension. A new voice joined, Veshnar, the emissary who'd first contacted them. The floating being pulsed with gentle colors as it hummed a frequency that translated roughly to, explain this value. What can word makers offer that the symphony cannot provide? Kale looked at her team, then back at the council. An idea sparked. We can lie, yes. But we can also doubt. We can question. We can hold two opposing thoughts in our minds simultaneously without needing to harmonize them into consensus. This is disorder, Toralax rumbled. Chaos thinking. Maybe, Kale agreed. Or maybe it's how you solve problems that the symphony can't reach consensus on. You've been arguing about the Andromeda Corridor for what, years? The council's harmonic response crackled with surprise. Zara winced at the intensity. We heard about it in the docking briefings, Kale continued. 17 species with competing claims, and every time you try to reach resonance consensus, you end up in dissonance meditation that goes nowhere. What? Because you're all so harmonized with your own interests that you can't imagine alternatives. And humans can? The skepticism in the symphony was palpable. We debate, Marcus spoke up for the first time. We argue. We present cases for and against positions we don't even personally believe in. It's messy and loud and sometimes it takes forever, but we get to solutions that satisfy nobody perfectly and everybody partially. Compromise, Amara added. Not harmony, compromise. The art of everyone being equally unhappy but moving forward anyway. The resonance chamber fell into unusual quiet. The symphony didn't stop, it never truly stopped, but it softened, became contemplative. Kale could feel the council processing this alien concept. Finally Veshnar hummed again. Show us. The Andromeda Corridor dispute. Use your words. Let us observe this human way of solving the unsolvable. Kale glanced at her team. They were being given a chance, but it felt like a test they weren't prepared for. She'd commanded ships and colonies, not mediated ancient territorial disputes between alien species. We'll need information, she said. Everything about the competing claims. And time to prepare. You have 3 cycles, Torlax stated. If you fail, the Confluence will vote on whether humanity should be granted asylum or asked to leave our space permanently. As they exited the resonance chamber, Marcus let out a long breath. No pressure, right? Zara was quiet, her face still pale from the intensity of experiencing the symphony. They're scared of us, she said softly. That's what I felt underneath everything. We terrify them because we exist outside their fundamental way of understanding reality. Then we'd better show them, Kale said, that scary and valuable can be the same thing. The Andromeda puzzle. The briefing room aboard the Perseverance had become mission control for what the crew was calling Operation Babel, a reference to an old Earth story about a tower and the confusion of languages. Holographic displays covered every surface, showing star charts, resource analyses and profile after profile of the 17 species claiming rights to the Andromeda Corridor. This is impossible, Marcus groaned, scrolling through his 7th hour of data. The Velcora claim ancestral migration rights because their precursor species traveled through the corridor 3 million years ago. The Shard Collective says their resonance signatures are embedded in the corridor's spatial fabric. The Thrumkale argue that they first militarized the space and therefore own it by conquest. And those are just 3 of 17 competing claims, Amara added, not looking up from her own display. Each one is equally valid by the standards of the species presenting it. No wonder the symphony can't reach consensus. Kale paced the room, her mind racing. In the corner, Zara sat with her eyes closed, listening to recordings of the symphony's previous attempts at resolving the dispute. They'd been given access to 2 centuries of deliberations, countless hours of harmonic debate that went nowhere. What if we're approaching this wrong? Kale stopped pacing. The Confluence keeps trying to find the right answer, the claim that harmonizes with everyone's sense of justice and historical precedent. But what if there isn't one? Then what do we do? Marcus asked. We find the useful answer instead. Kale pulled up a new holographic display, showing the corridor itself. A region of space approximately 3 light-years long, rich in exotic matter and providing the fastest route between 2 spiral arms of the galaxy. Forget the claims for a moment. What's the corridor actually used for? Amara caught on immediately. Trade. Scientific research. Military positioning. Cultural significance for species whose origin myths reference it. Right. So what if instead of deciding who owns it, we decide how everyone can use it? Kale began sketching out a framework on the holodisplay. Humans have been dealing with shared resources for millennia. We've created everything from timeshare arrangements to international waters to cultural heritage sites. Zara's eyes snapped open. They won't understand that. The concept of shared ownership without harmonic unity, it's antithetical to how the symphony functions. Then we'll have to explain it in a way that makes sense to them, Kale replied. That's our advantage. We can think in paradoxes. We can hold the idea that 17 species can all be right simultaneously without any of them being in harmony. Over the next 2 cycles the human team worked frantically. They created what Marcus dubbed the Corridor Accord, a framework that divided usage rights not by ownership but by purpose. Scientific expeditions would have access during certain periods. Trade routes would be guaranteed for all species. Military presence would be limited and monitored by a rotating coalition. Cultural pilgrimages would be protected and scheduled. The key, Amara explained as they refined the proposal, is that we're not asking them to agree on who deserves it most. We're showing them that the question itself is the problem. But the night before their presentation to the council, doubt crept in. Kale found herself on the observation deck, staring out at the Confluence station. Its crystalline structures pulsed with the constant flow of the symphony, billions of beings in perpetual harmonic conversation. Beautiful. Alien. Utterly foreign. Can't sleep either? Zara's voice came from behind her. Wondering if we're about to make complete fools of ourselves, Kale admitted. Zara moved to stand beside her. I've been listening to the symphony, really listening. And I've noticed something. There are cracks in it. Cracks. Moments where the harmony falters. usually when they encounter something truly new or unexpected. It's like, the symphony is incredibly good at processing information that fits its existing patterns, but it struggles with genuine novelty. And we're novel. We're the definition of novel, Zara smiled. Commander, every species in the confluence evolved their harmonic resonance over millions of years. It's literally how their brains work. But it also means they all think similarly. They have different perspectives, yes, but those perspectives all flow through the same fundamental cognitive framework. While we're out here using clumsy verbal language and linear thinking, Kale said. Exactly. And maybe that's not a bug, it's a feature. We solve problems they can't because we think in ways they can't. Zara paused, choosing her words carefully. The symphony is beautiful, Kale. But it's also a consensus engine. It's designed to find harmony, not to embrace discord. Sometimes the best answer is the discordant one. The next morning, the human delegation returned to the resonance chamber. The full council had assembled, all 50 representatives, plus observers from dozens more species. The symphony swelled as they entered, and Kale felt the weight of countless minds focusing on them. Veshnar floated at the center of the chamber. Humans, you have studied the Andromeda Corridor dispute. The symphony awaits your proposed solution. Kale stepped forward, Amara and Marcus flanking her, while Zara remained slightly behind, monitoring the harmonic response. They'd practiced this presentation a dozen times, but standing here in the actual chamber, surrounded by beings who communicated through empathic resonance, Kale felt the absurdity of using words. She began anyway. Honored Council, we've reviewed 2 centuries of deliberations on the Andromeda Corridor. And we've concluded that you're asking the wrong question. The symphony rippled with surprise and indignation. Toralax's rumble translated harshly, you presume to tell the confluence its error? With respect, yes, Kale continued. You've been trying to determine which species has the rightful claim to the corridor. But ownership requires harmony, all of you need to resonate with the choice for it to feel legitimate. That's never going to happen because you all have equally valid, equally incompatible claims. Then the dispute is unsolvable, another voice in the symphony stated. Not unsolvable, Amara interjected. Merely unanswerable in the way you've been trying to answer it. So we propose a different framework entirely, the Corridor Accord. Marcus activated their presentation and holographic displays materialized throughout the chamber, showing the breakdown of their proposal. As they explained the concept, shared access based on purpose rather than ownership, scheduled usage, rotating oversight, Kale watched the symphony's response through Zara's increasingly wide eyes. The harmonic frequencies in the chamber were going chaotic. Dissonance and discovery. The symphony was fragmenting. That's what it sounded like to Zara as she pressed her hands over her ears, trying to filter the overwhelming cacophony of conflicting harmonics. The resonance chamber, normally a place of carefully modulated frequencies, had become a storm of competing vibrations. Is this normal? Marcus whispered urgently to Kale. I have no idea, she admitted, watching as the council representatives seemed to vibrate in place, their usual coordinated movements replaced by erratic, individual oscillations. Veshnar's bioluminescence flickered rapidly, a sign of distress, Kale had learned. The emissary hummed a frequency that cut through the chaos. Pause. Silence. The humans have introduced profound discord. The symphony didn't quiet so much as fracture into smaller conversations. Through Zara's strained translations and their implants, Kale pieced together what was happening. The Corridor Accord wasn't just a proposal, it was a cognitive virus to beings who thought in harmonic consensus. They literally can't process the concept, Amara breathed, watching her analysis display light up with unprecedented neural patterns from the council members. Shared ownership without unified agreement, it's creating feedback loops in their resonance networks. Toralax's massive form rumbled, sending shockwaves through the chamber floor. This is chaos. The humans propose we abandon harmony itself, accept permanent dissonance as a solution. Not abandon harmony, Kale called out, fighting to be heard over the symphony's tumult. Expand beyond it. You've treated consensus as the only valid endpoint, but what if it's not? What if sometimes the best solution is one that nobody fully harmonizes with? Impossible. The response came from multiple species simultaneously, their frequencies briefly aligning in mutual rejection. Without harmonic consensus, how do we know the solution serves the greater good? How do we trust it? Zara stepped forward suddenly, surprising even Kale. The former negotiator's voice rang clear. You don't. That's the point. Trust without verification. That's what humans do every day. The symphony faltered, curiosity cutting through the chaos. Every time humans negotiate, we make agreements that nobody is completely happy with, Zara continued, and Kale realized she was finally using her unique gift. The ability to almost hear the symphony meant she could speak to it in ways the rest of them couldn't. We sign treaties knowing the other side might cheat. We make compromises knowing they're imperfect. We do it anyway because the alternative, endless argument until perfect harmony is achieved, means nothing ever gets done. But how do you survive such uncertainty? Veshnar hummed, genuine confusion in the frequency. The symphony provides certainty. When we reach consensus, we know the path is correct because we all resonate with it. Do you though? Amara pulled up historical data on the chamber displays. We've analyzed 200 years of your deliberations on the Andromeda corridor. Every proposed solution achieved partial consensus, then fell apart when new information emerged or when species changed their positions. You've been in dissonance meditation for 2 centuries. How is that certainty? The silence that followed was profound. Not the absence of sound, the symphony never truly stopped, but a quality of stillness that suggested deep processing. Finally, a new voice entered the conversation. The windborne representative, a being of swirling gases named Ares Vel, who until now had remained silent. Perhaps, the humans reveal a truth we have been unwilling to harmonize with. The corridor dispute persists not because we lack information, but because perfect consensus is unattainable. Then we are failed, Toralax rumbled. If the symphony cannot solve this, we are no better than the discordant species of the ancient records, those who destroyed themselves through endless conflict. Or, Kale said softly, you're exactly as good as you've always been, just facing a new type of problem. The symphony is incredibly powerful for problems with harmonious solutions. But some problems don't have those. Some problems require compromise, which by definition means accepting imperfection. She gestured to the holographic display of the corridor accord. This proposal won't make any of you happy. The Velcora won't get exclusive migration rights. The Shard Collective won't have uncontested resonance access. The Thrumkael won't achieve military dominance. Every single one of you will have to accept less than what you believe you deserve. Why would we accept this? Multiple council members demanded, their frequencies clashing. Because the alternative is 2 more centuries of debate, Marcus answered. Or worse, eventually one of you might decide that if the symphony can't reach consensus, maybe military force should decide instead. We've seen it happen in human history 1,000 times. When peaceful negotiation fails, war becomes tempting. The symphony shuddered at that, a harmonic frequency that translated roughly to horror and denial. Humans have warred, Veshnar stated. This is known from your historical transmissions. You speak of peace while having practiced violence. Yes, Kale admitted. We've fought countless wars over resources, territory, ideology. And you know what we learned? That military victory doesn't create lasting solutions. It just creates resentment and future conflicts. The only solutions that endure are the ones where everyone gets something, even if nobody gets everything. Amara activated another display. We've modeled the Corridor Accord's implementation. Year 1 would be turbulent. You'd all be learning to operate in scheduled coordination rather than harmonic unity. But by year 5, traffic through the corridor would increase by 40%. Scientific discoveries would triple because multiple species would be conducting research simultaneously, sharing findings. Cultural exchanges would flourish. And conflicts, asked Ares Vel. There would be disputes, Amara acknowledged. Our model predicts approximately 200 minor incidents in the first decade. But that's 200 manageable conflicts instead of one catastrophic unresolved dispute that threatens galactic stability. Zara was smiling now, her eyes closed as she listened to the symphony. They're starting to get it, she whispered to Kale. I can hear it, little pockets of the symphony experimenting with the concept. They're imagining discord as a tool instead of a failure state. The council deliberated. Unlike human meetings, where discussions followed orderly turns of speech, the symphony's deliberation was a complex, multi-layered conversation where hundreds of subdialogues occurred simultaneously. Kale and her team could only catch fragments through their translators. After what felt like hours but was probably only minutes, Veshnar's harmonics rose above the rest. The council cannot reach consensus on the Corridor Accord. This impasse would normally trigger extended dissonance meditation. Kale's heart sank. They'd failed. However, Veshnar continued, and the symphony shifted to a frequency Kale had never heard before, complex, layered, almost painful in its beauty. We propose something unprecedented. We will implement the corridor accord not through harmonic consensus, but through what the humans call majority vote. Those who resonate with the proposal will signal agreement. Those who do not will signal disagreement. If more agree than disagree, we proceed despite imperfect harmony. The resonance chamber erupted in frequencies that made Zara cry out and press her hands to her temples. Species who had existed in harmonic civilization for millions of years were being asked to make a decision without consensus, to accept that their society could move forward with significant portions of the symphony in disagreement. One by one, the council members signaled. Some resonated with acceptance. Others pulsed with rejection. The tally was close, 32 in favor, 18 against. The corridor accord is approved, Veshnar announced, and the symphony shuddered with a mixture of relief, anxiety, and something that might have been hope or fear. For the first time in Confluence history, we have made a decision through discord rather than harmony. As the council dispersed, still humming with agitated frequencies, Toralax approached the human delegation. The massive Thrumcale rumbled a frequency that their implants translated, "You have changed something fundamental today. Whether for good or ill we cannot yet know. But the symphony will never be the same." "Change is scary," Kale agreed. "But sometimes it's necessary. Humans," the Thrumcale rumbled, "are either our salvation or our doom. Time will tell which." The price of words. 6 months after the Corridor Accord was implemented, humanity's position in the galactic confluence had transformed from curiosity to necessity. The success of the Accord, messy, imperfect, but functional, had opened eyes across the symphony to the value of what they now called discord methodology. Kale barely recognized her life anymore. The Perseverance had been joined by 3 more human ships, bringing the Earth delegation up to nearly 1,000 people. They'd established an embassy on the Confluence Station, a series of modules that humans jokingly called the Quiet Zone, because the symphony's constant harmonics were dampened there. But the price of success was becoming clear. "Another one," Marcus said grimly, sliding a data tablet across Kale's desk. "That makes 12 this month." Kale read the report and felt her stomach drop. Jenna Park, one of their linguists, had suffered what the medical staff was calling a harmonic breakdown. She'd been working with a Shard Collective research team, trying to translate complex crystalline mathematics into human language. After 3 weeks of constant exposure to the symphony's frequencies, she'd collapsed during a meeting, screaming about sounds that wouldn't stop. She was currently sedated in the medical bay, and the doctors weren't sure when, or if she'd recover. "Dr. Singh says it's a form of sensory overload," Marcus continued. "The human brain wasn't designed to process harmonic resonance the way the symphony uses it. When we're exposed for extended periods, especially those of us trying to actively participate, it causes neural stress that can lead to psychosis." "How many are affected?" Kale asked. 12 confirmed cases. But Amara thinks we're seeing early symptoms in maybe 50 others. Headaches, audio hallucinations, difficulty with verbal communication. Zara's been the worst, she's in medical now too. Kale's head snapped up. "Since when?" "Since this morning. She collapsed during a negotiation session with the Velcora. Kale, she's been pushing herself too hard. She can almost hear the symphony, which means she's more vulnerable to its effects than the rest of us." Kale was out of her chair and heading to medical before Marcus finished speaking. She found Zara in an isolation room, the walls lined with harmonic dampeners. Her friend lay on a medical bed, her face pale and drawn, with dark circles under her eyes that spoke of weeks of poor sleep. "Hey," Zara said weakly when Kale entered. "Come to tell me I'm an idiot for pushing too hard?" "I came to check on you," Kale replied, pulling up a chair. "How bad is it?" "I can still hear it," Zara whispered. "Even through the dampeners. It's like, imagine the most beautiful music you've ever heard, but it never stops. It's in your head when you sleep, when you eat, when you try to think. And the worst part? I'm starting to understand it. Really understand it." "Is that so bad?" Zara's laugh was bitter. "Kale, the more I understand the symphony, the more I realize how limited human communication is. We speak in these clumsy linear sequences, one word after another, building meaning through sequential logic. But the symphony communicates entire concepts simultaneously. Layers of meaning, emotional context, historical reference, future implications, all in a single harmonic phrase. That doesn't make us inferior, Kale said firmly. Doesn't it? Zara turned to look at her. The confluence has been spacefaring for 1,000,000 years. They've built a civilization spanning thousands of worlds. They've solved problems we can't even conceptualize. And they do it all through the symphony. Meanwhile, we're still learning how to not give ourselves brain damage just from listening too long. Before Kale could respond, the medical bay's alert system chimed. Dr. Amara Singh's voice came through. "Commander, you need to see this. We found something." Kale squeezed Zara's hand and headed to Amara's lab. What she found there made her stop in the doorway. The xenobiologist was surrounded by holographic displays showing brain scans, frequency analyses, and genetic sequences. "I've been studying the affected crew members," Amara explained without preamble, "trying to understand why the symphony's harmonics cause such severe reactions in humans. And I found something unexpected." She pulled up a comparison display showing human neural structures alongside those of various confluent species. Every species in the symphony has specialized organs or neural structures that evolved specifically to process harmonic resonance. The Shard Collective has crystalline matrices in their core structures. The Thrumkale have seismic receivers throughout their bodies. Even Veshnar's species has bioluminescent chambers that modulate frequencies. "And humans have nothing," Kale said. "Correct. Our brains are optimized for language processing. Broca's area, Wernicke's area, the entire left hemisphere infrastructure for verbal communication. We're linguistic specialists in a galaxy of harmonic generalists. So we're neurologically incompatible with the symphony. We already knew that." "Yes, but here's what we didn't know." Amara's eyes gleamed with the excitement of discovery. "I ran simulations based on the genetic data we've collected from confluent species. Do you know what would happen if any of them tried to develop human-style linguistic processing? They'd get sick like we are? Worse. Their harmonic structures are so fundamental to their neural architecture that developing sequential linguistic processing would be like asking a fish to evolve lungs while it's still underwater. It would be catastrophic. They literally cannot think the way we do, just as we cannot naturally harmonize the way they do." Kale processed this. "So we're not just different, we're uniquely different." "Exactly." Amara pulled up another display, this one showing communication efficiency metrics. "But here's the fascinating part. I've been analyzing the corridor accord negotiations. Do you know why it worked when 2 centuries of symphony deliberation failed? Because we can hold contradictory ideas simultaneously? That's part of it. But more fundamentally, it's because we can communicate about things we don't fully understand or agree with. The symphony requires emotional and conceptual harmony to transmit ideas clearly. If you don't resonate with a concept, you can't effectively communicate it." Amara pulled up examples from the symphony's historical debates. "Look at this exchange from 50 years ago. The Velcora tried to propose a resource-sharing model, but because they themselves had doubts about it, their harmonic transmission was weak and unclear. Other species couldn't even properly understand the proposal because it wasn't transmitted with confidence. Whereas humans can argue passionately for positions we personally disagree with," Kale mused. "Exactly. We can say, 'I think this is wrong, but here's the strongest case for it anyway.' That kind of meta-level communication, discussing ideas separately from our emotional stance on them, is apparently unique to linguistic species." "Apparently? You mean there might be others?" Amara's expression turned serious. "I've been digging through the Confluent's historical archives. There's almost nothing about other linguistic species, which struck me as odd given that the Confluent spans millions of years and thousands of worlds. So I asked Veshnar about it. And there have been others. At least 7 documented species that used verbal linguistic communication as their primary mode. The archives call them the silent ones. And Kale, they all disappeared." The temperature in the room seemed to drop. "Disappeared how?" "The records are vague. Some apparently died out. Others left Confluent space voluntarily. One species, the Kretshan, was last documented 15,000 years ago. They specialized in something called conceptual warfare, using linguistic tricks and logical paradoxes to disrupt harmonic civilizations. You think the Confluence eliminated them? I don't know. But I do know that we're walking a very fine line. We're useful now because we solved a problem the symphony couldn't. But if we become seen as a threat..." Amara didn't finish the sentence. Kale returned to her office with a weight in her chest that hadn't been there before. The success of the Corridor Accord had seemed like humanity's ticket into the galactic community. But what if it had actually painted a target on their backs? She pulled up the communication logs looking for patterns. What she found chilled her. Dozens of species had reached out to human negotiators in the past month, asking for help with disputes the symphony couldn't resolve. The humans were becoming indispensable, which in politics, Kale knew, was often more dangerous than being irrelevant. That night she called an emergency meeting of the senior staff. Marcus, Amara, and even Zara, who'd insisted on attending despite medical protests, gathered in the conference room. "We have a problem," Cale began and laid out everything Amara had discovered. The silence that followed was heavy. "So what do we do?" Marcus asked finally. "Go back to Earth?" "We can't," Amara said quietly. "Half our ships don't have enough fuel for the return journey. And even if they did, we've learned too much. Brought back too much technology. Earth would never accept abandoning the confluence." "Then we need to make ourselves essential," Zara said, her voice hoarse but determined. "Not just useful, essential. So essential that the confluence can't imagine functioning without us." "How?" Cale asked. Zara smiled weakly. "By teaching them to listen." The Academy of Discord. The building that would become the Linguistic Institute was a compromise in architecture. Human corridors and chambers nested within a larger structure that resonated with the symphony's frequencies. Cale stood at its entrance 1 year after the corridor accord, watching as the first cohort of non-human students arrived. "I still can't believe they agreed to this," Marcus said beside her. Neither could Cale. The proposal had been audacious: create a school where confluent species could learn human communication methods. Not to replace the symphony but to augment it, to give them the tools to think and communicate in ways that harmonic resonance couldn't reach. The resistance had been fierce. Toralax had called it cognitive colonization. Several species had withdrawn their ambassadors in protest. But Veshnar had surprised everyone by becoming the Institute's strongest advocate. "The humans have shown us our limitation," the emissary had hummed before the council. "The symphony is beautiful, but it is not complete. We must learn their ways as they struggle to learn ours." Now, 50 students from 20 different species waited nervously in the Institute's main hall. Cale watched them, crystalline beings standing next to gaseous clouds, rock-like Thrumkel beside delicate insectoid chur. The diversity was stunning. Dr. Amara Singh stepped forward to address them, her voice amplified through the chamber. "Welcome to the first session of the Linguistic Institute. I'm Dr. Singh, and I'll be your primary instructor in human communication theory. I know this is uncomfortable for many of you. You've spent your entire lives communicating through the symphony. The idea of using sequential, verbal language probably feels primitive." The students' harmonic responses rippled through the chamber: agreement, nervousness, curiosity. "It probably is primitive," Amara continued with a smile. "Humans evolved language because we lacked the neural structures for harmonic resonance. We made words because we couldn't make music. But here's what we've learned over millions of years of verbal communication: limitations breed creativity." She activated a holographic display showing the evolution of human language, from simple grunts to complex syntax, from cave paintings to written literature, from radio waves to digital encoding. Language forced us to break reality into discrete chunks: nouns, verbs, adjectives. It made us think linearly, sequentially. And yes, that's limiting compared to the symphony's holistic communication. But it also gave us something unique: the ability to manipulate abstract concepts independently of our emotional resonance with them. A shard collective student, her crystalline form humming with confusion, sent a frequency that translated to, "But why would we want to separate thought from feeling? The symphony's strength is its emotional authenticity. How can we trust communication that lacks resonance?" "That's exactly the question we're here to explore," Amara replied. "Let's start with a simple exercise. I'm going to teach you a human concept that has no harmonic equivalent: sarcasm." The next 3 hours were simultaneously hilarious and profound. Watching alien species try to grasp the concept of saying one thing while meaning another, a verbal irony that depended on tone and context rather than resonant truth, revealed just how fundamentally different human and confluence cognition truly were. "But this is lying," a wind-born student protested, their gaseous forms swirling with agitation. "You speak words that contradict your meaning. How is this not deception?" "Because both the speaker and the listener understand the game," Zara explained. She'd recovered enough to join the teaching staff, though she still wore neural dampeners to limit her exposure to the symphony. "Sarcasm is collaborative. It requires both parties to work together to decode the real meaning beneath the words." "This seems inefficient," rumbled a young Thrumkel. "It is," Cale agreed, entering the discussion. "But inefficiency isn't always bad. Sometimes the path to understanding requires taking the long way around." Over the following months, the Institute became a fascinating experiment in cross-species cognitive exchange. The students learned reading and writing, translating their thoughts into linear sequences of symbols. They practiced debate, arguing positions they didn't personally hold. They studied human literature, trying to grasp stories where unreliable narrators deliberately misled readers. But the exchange wasn't one-directional. The human instructors were learning too. Zara made a breakthrough 3 months into the program. She'd been working with a Velcora student named Threnmore on understanding metaphor, a concept that gave Velcora particular trouble because their harmonic communication transmitted literal meanings so precisely. "I think I understand now why you struggle," Zara said during a private session. "In the symphony, when you say, 'My heart is heavy,' you literally transmit the emotional weight you're feeling. There's no separation between the metaphor and the reality it represents." Threnmore's harmonic response pulsed with excitement. "Yes. And when you speak these words without harmonic transmission, we search for the literal meaning. We wonder what makes human hearts change mass. So metaphor for us is a bridge between literal and emotional meaning. But for you, that bridge is built into the symphony itself. Then how do you create poetry?" Threnmore asked. "How do you make language beautiful when it cannot carry emotional resonance?" Zara pulled up examples of human poetry: Shakespeare, Rumi, Maya Angelou. "We do it through sound and rhythm. Through the choice and arrangement of words. Through layers of meaning that emerge when you put specific words in specific orders." She read aloud, "Do not go gentle into that good night. Rage, rage against the dying of the light." Threnmore was silent, their harmonic frequencies muted. Then slowly, "I do not fully understand the words. But the pattern of sounds, it creates something. A feeling. Even without harmonic resonance, I feel something." That moment, that recognition that meaning could be created through pure linguistic structure, opened new doors. The Confluence students began experimenting with creating their own verbal poetry, translating harmonic concepts into sequential words and discovering that the translation itself created new meanings. But not everyone celebrated these developments. 6 months into the Institute's operation, Kale received a summons to appear before the council. The message was terse and carried harmonic undertones of deep concern. She entered the resonance chamber to find it divided in a way she'd never seen before. Roughly half the council hummed in harmonics that felt supportive. The other half pulsed with frequencies that could only be described as hostile. Torlax spoke first. "The Linguistic Institute must close. It is corrupting our young with discordant thinking." "Corrupting?" Kale kept her voice level. "They're learning new communication tools. They are learning to lie." The Thrumkale's rumble shook the chamber. "We have intercepted communications between Institute students. They use sarcasm. They make statements they do not mean. They hide their true intentions behind verbal tricks. This is exactly what the ancient Silent Ones did before they were exiled." "The Silent Ones weren't exiled," Veshnar interjected. "The historical records are clear, they chose to leave. Because they were no longer compatible with the symphony," another council member added. "And now you wish to make our children incompatible as well." Kale took a deep breath. "The Institute isn't trying to replace the symphony. It's trying to expand what your species can do. Yes, verbal language allows for deception. But it also allows for exploration of ideas without commitment. For understanding perspectives you don't agree with. For solving problems that require thinking outside harmonic consensus. We do not want these abilities," Torlax stated flatly. "The symphony has guided our civilization for 1,000,000 years. We do not need human chaos." "Then why," Kale asked quietly, "have 73 different species requested human negotiators in the past 6 months? Why are the trade routes we've established using Discord methodology moving cargo 40% faster than traditional symphony coordination? Why are scientific collaborations using mixed harmonic and verbal communication producing breakthrough discoveries at triple the historical rate?" The symphony rippled with uncomfortable harmonics. Kale pressed her advantage. "You keep calling it chaos. But what if it's not chaos at all? What if it's just a different kind of order? One that complements the symphony instead of replacing it?" Arisvel, the Windborn representative, swirled forward. "The commander raises valid points. But there is also truth in Torlax's concerns. We are changing. Our young ones who attend the Institute return different. They question traditions that have endured for millennia. They resist harmonic consensus. Is this the price we must pay for efficiency?" "No," said a new voice. Threnmore, the Velcora student Zara had been working with, entered the chamber. Several other Institute students followed. "The price is discovering that what we thought was unity might have been uniformity." The council's harmonic frequencies spiked with shock. Students didn't address the council. It simply wasn't done. But Threnmore continued, speaking in carefully constructed verbal sentences rather than pure harmonic resonance. I have learned at the Institute that I can hold two opposing thoughts simultaneously. That I can understand perspectives I do not share. That I can change my mind without losing my identity. These abilities do not make me less Velcora. They make me more. The other students added their voices, some in harmonics, some in words, many in a hybrid of both. They spoke of discoveries, of new ways of thinking, of problems solved through discord that the symphony had struggled with for years. Cale watched the council process this unprecedented display. The symphony swelled with conflicting emotions: pride, fear, hope, resistance. Finally, Veshnar hummed a frequency that commanded attention. We are faced with a choice that perhaps requires the very discord methodology we debate. We can close the Institute and return to pure harmonic communication. Or we can embrace change and become something new. I propose we vote. The vote was closer than Cale would have liked. 28 for keeping the Institute open, 22 for closing it. But it was enough. As the council dispersed, Toralax approached Cale one final time. You have won today, human. But know this, you are changing us in ways that cannot be undone. If this path leads to disaster, it will be remembered as the day humanity corrupted the symphony. Or, Cale replied, it might be remembered as the day the symphony learned to sing in new voices. The Chamber of Echoes. 5 years after humanity's arrival in the confluence, the galaxy had fundamentally changed. Cale stood in what the media called the Chamber of Echoes, a new type of meeting space designed by human and confluence engineers working together. Half the chamber resonated with harmonic frequencies, allowing symphony communication to flow freely. The other half was acoustically dampened, creating space for verbal discourse. In the center, a hybrid zone where both forms of communication could coexist. It was here that the galactic confluence was attempting something unprecedented. A joint session where every decision would be made using both harmonic consensus and verbal voting, with the results compared and analyzed. The occasion was significant enough to draw representatives from all 847 documented species. The question before them: should humanity be granted full membership in the Confederation, including voting rights and access to restricted technologies? This is it, Marcus whispered to Cale as they waited in the human delegation area. 5 years of work comes down to this moment. Cale nodded, watching the chamber fill. The crowd was different from that first council meeting. Many of the representatives now wore translation implants that worked both ways, converting harmonic resonance to verbal approximation for the humans, and verbal language into simplified harmonic patterns for confluent species. It wasn't perfect, but it was progress. Veshnar floated to the center of the chamber, bioluminescent form pulsing with formal patterns. We gather in the Chamber of Echoes to address a question that has divided the symphony for 5 cycles. Humanity, a species that communicates through discord, seeks full integration into our civilization. We must decide if we can harmonize with those who speak instead of resonate. The emissary paused, tendrils shifting in what Cale had learned was an expression of profound thought. But first, we must hear from those most affected by the human presence. Step forward, graduates of the Linguistic Institute. Over 300 confluent citizens moved into the central zone. They'd all completed the full curriculum at the Institute, learning not just human language, but the entire cognitive framework of verbal linguistic thinking. Among them was Threnmore, now an advocate for what she called multimodal communication. Threnmore spoke in both modes simultaneously, verbal words overlaid with harmonic resonance, creating a rich, complex transmission that humans could partially understand and confluent species could fully appreciate. I am Velcora. My people have existed in the symphony for 6 million years. We are builders, creators, artists of harmonic resonance. I thought this defined us completely. She paused, her form pulsing with emotion. But the humans taught me that identity is not singular. I can be fully Velcora while also being something new. I can think in harmonic holism and sequential logic. I can feel truth and speak paradox. This does not diminish me, it expands me. Other graduates shared similar testimonies. A Shard collective mathematician who'd solved a centuries-old equation by combining harmonic intuition with verbal proofwriting. A Thrumkale engineer who designed a new type of faster-than-light drive by thinking about the problem both seismically and linguistically. A Windborn philosopher who'd written treatises that existed simultaneously as harmonic compositions and written texts. What they don't tell you, said one young chair graduate, her insectoid form vibrating with excitement, is how addictive verbal communication becomes. In the symphony, meaning flows directly. But with words, I must work to construct meaning. I must choose each word carefully. And in that choosing, in that effort, I discover thoughts I didn't know I had. Words don't just communicate ideas, they help create them. But not all testimonies were positive. A Thrumcale spoke of feeling alienated from his birth clan, who could no longer fully harmonize with him after his exposure to linguistic thinking. A Shard Collective student described the psychological strain of holding contradictory ideas simultaneously, a normal state for humans but profoundly disturbing for a species that valued crystalline clarity. The humans have indeed changed us, this student admitted. Whether that change is evolution or corruption, I cannot say with certainty. Then came the opposition. Toralax stood in the harmonic section, his massive form radiating frequencies of deep concern. I do not dispute that linguistic thinking offers new capabilities, but at what cost? 5 years ago, our civilization operated in harmony. Decisions emerged through resonance. Conflicts resolved through meditation. Now we vote. We argue. We compromise, accepting solutions that satisfy nobody fully. We have adopted human discord and called it progress. The symphony swelled with supporting frequencies from multiple species. Toralax continued. More troubling, we are fragmenting. Institute graduates can no longer fully harmonize with their birth species. They exist in a liminal space, not fully part of the symphony, not fully human. We are creating a generation of cognitive hybrids who may belong nowhere. Or everywhere, Kale said, stepping forward. She hadn't planned to speak, but Toralax's words demanded response. You're right that Institute graduates are changed. They can't fully harmonize anymore because they've expanded beyond pure harmonic thinking. But they also can't communicate like humans because they retain their resonance abilities. They're not lost between two worlds, they're bridges connecting them. She gestured to the chamber around them. This entire structure, the Chamber of Echoes, was designed by these so-called cognitive hybrids. Neither pure humans nor pure confluence beings could have envisioned it. It required minds that could think in both modalities. Amara joined her. Commander Toralax speaks of fragmentation as if it's automatically negative. But every major evolutionary leap involves breaking apart existing structures to create new ones. Yes, we're changing the symphony. But the symphony was already changing. You'd been unable to resolve certain types of conflicts for centuries before we arrived. The Andromeda Corridor dispute was just one example. The Corridor Accord works, added Threnmore, her voice carrying harmonic undertones of conviction. Trade has increased. Conflicts have decreased. Multiple species now cooperate in that space who previously wouldn't acknowledge each other's existence. And it only became possible when the symphony learned to embrace discord. Zara stepped forward last. She looked healthier now, having learned to balance her unique sensitivity to the symphony with proper neural dampening and rest cycles. I was terrified of the symphony at first, she admitted. It was overwhelming, this constant flow of perfect harmonic communication that I could almost but not quite understand. I thought it made humans inferior. She paused, looking around the chamber. But I've spent 5 years learning from the confluence and teaching them about human cognition. And here's what I've discovered. Neither system is superior. They're complementary. She activated a holographic display showing neural activity patterns. The symphony excels at holistic problem-solving, emotional authenticity, and achieving unified action across vast distances. Human verbal communication excels at abstract reasoning, handling paradox, and exploring ideas without commitment. Used together, they cover each other's blind spots. The chamber fell silent, or as silent as it could be with the symphony's ever-present background hum. Veshnar floated forward. We have heard testimony from both perspectives. Now we must decide. The Council has prepared 2 questions. First, should humanity be granted full Confederation membership? Second, the emissary continued, and perhaps more importantly, should the Confluence officially recognize multimodal communication, combining harmonic and linguistic methods, as a valid path forward for our civilization? The vote was conducted in the new hybrid format. Representatives in the harmonic section resonated their positions, creating waves of agreement or disagreement that the chamber's systems analyzed. Those in the verbal section spoke their votes aloud. Those in the hybrid zone did both. Kale watched the tallies appear on holographic displays. The results were remarkably close. On humanities membership, 412 in favor, 398 against, 37 abstaining. On multimodal communication, 441 in favor, 389 against, 17 abstaining. The proposals pass, Veshnar announced, and the symphony swelled with complex harmonics, celebration mixed with trepidation, hope tinged with fear. As the chamber erupted in discussion, both harmonic and verbal, Toralax approached Kale one final time. The massive Thrumkale's seismic rumble translated to, "You have won, Commander Thorn. Humanity is now part of the confluence. I hope we do not come to regret this day." "So do I," Kale replied honestly. "But even if challenges come, we'll face them together. That's what membership means." "Together," Toralax repeated, testing the word. "A human concept. In the symphony we were always together, harmonically unified. Your together implies separate entities choosing connection rather than automatic resonance." "Yes," Kale smiled. "That's exactly what it means. And maybe that kind of chosen connection is stronger than automatic harmony." The Thrumkale rumbled thoughtfully and turned away, leaving Kale to rejoin her team. Epilogue. 10 years later, the Galactic Confederation barely resembled the organization humanity had first encountered. The symphony still existed, still connected billions of beings across thousands of worlds in harmonic resonance. But it had been fundamentally transformed. Linguistic institutes had spread to over 100 worlds. Hybrid communication had become standard in scientific research, diplomacy, and trade. A new generation was emerging, beings who thought in multiple modalities, who could harmonize and debate, resonate and argue. Commander Kale Thorn, now promoted to Admiral and serving as humanity's chief representative to the Confederation, stood in a new chamber of echoes, one of 50 now scattered across confluence space. She was here to witness the graduation of the largest class yet, over 10,000 students from 200 species, all completing the Advanced Multimodal Communication Program. Threnmore, now Dr. Threnmore and director of the Linguistic Institute, addressed the graduates in her signature style, verbal words carrying harmonic resonance. "You are pioneers," she told them. "You exist between worlds, thinking in modes your ancestors never imagined. Some will say you've lost your cultural purity. They're wrong. You haven't lost anything, you've gained new dimensions of existence." As the ceremony concluded and graduates celebrated with a cacophony of harmonic tones and shouted congratulations, Kale felt someone approach. It was Veshnar, the emissary who'd first welcomed humanity and who'd become an unlikely ally. Reflecting on the changes, the floating being hummed. "Always," Kale replied. "Sometimes I still can't believe we pulled this off. Humanity could have been rejected, exiled, or worse. You gave us something we desperately needed but were too harmonically unified to recognize: the ability to disagree productively. The symphony was beautiful but stagnant. You showed us that discord and harmony aren't opposites, they're partners." Veshnar's tendrils shifted and what Kale had learned was a gesture of deep satisfaction. "The Chamber of Echoes is well named. Our voices echo off each other now, harmonic and verbal, unified and individual. We are becoming something neither humans nor confluent species could have become alone." "A new symphony?" Kale suggested. "Perhaps. Or perhaps we are learning that the universe contains more than one song, and that the greatest beauty comes when different melodies learn to listen to each other." As Kale watched the graduates dispersing, some humming, some talking, many doing both, she thought about that first terrifying day when the Perseverance had arrived at the confluence station. They'd been so afraid of being too different, too primitive, too discordant. But in the end, humanity's greatest contribution to the galaxy hadn't been technology or knowledge. It had been teaching an entire civilization that harmony was more beautiful when it learned to embrace discord, and that the most powerful communication came not from perfect resonance, but from the choice to listen to voices unlike your own. In the Chamber of Echoes, surrounded by 1,000 different ways of speaking and being heard, humanity had finally found its place among the stars, not as conquerors or supplicants, but as teachers of a simple truth: the universe is vast enough for every kind of voice. You just have to learn to listen.